Talk Radio.
Let's talk about vaccines. The chief executive of the, wait for it, UK Health Security Agency, that's UKHSA for short. What is that? I think it's that thing that used to be Public Health England. They said, oh, we're getting rid of this organisation. All they did was give it another name. Anyway, Dr. Jenny Harris, who I seem to remember used to be the Deputy Chief Medical Officer, she says that Britain is still in a period of uncertainty. The COVID crisis is not over, and that the over 75s, care home residents, and those who have immunity problems, in other words, the vulnerable, will continue to be vaccinated every 6 months for the foreseeable future. She was not 100% on that, but she did indicate that looks like the picture in the months and years to come. And my question really is, when is this ever going to end? The cases of COVID went down over the weekend. A lot of people have got it, but they're not dying, at least not in significant numbers. And the more people that get it, the less dangerous it becomes. So do we really need these medics constantly refusing to accept that this thing is on the way out and we've got to get back to normal life? I think it's a psychological thing, and it's bad for the nation. Let's talk to the leader of the Young Voices UK organisation, Jason Reed. Good evening, Jason.
Good evening, Kevin.
Yeah, I mean, I know that I could have got medical people on, you know, you'll get every number of vaccine experts, virologists, doctors, and they're going to come on and give us all the medical reasons why COVID is still with us and we've still got to be careful and we've got to look out for the old and the vulnerable. Fair enough. But it's the mindset of this nation that I'm worried about. Every time Jenny Harris comes out with this sort of stuff, or the likes of Jenny Harris, this nation takes a step back in the road to getting back to normality. Before you answer, let's have a little listen to Jenny Harris.
All relevant groups as per the evidence that we have. So the Spring Booster campaign is for those who are 75, care home residents and those who are immunocompromised. And I'm confident that as we go forward, we'll end up being able to hone those programmes, if you like, in the same way we are with treatments, to those people who most need them and are most able to benefit from them.
Well, Jason, that was her talking to the Public Affairs, the Public Accounts Committee in Parliament. But they're also still talking about rolling out the vaccine to 5-year-olds, to the 11 to 5-year-old group. And the rollout continues on a general basis as well. When is this ever going to end?
I'm afraid, despite my not being a doctor, this is no longer a medical or a scientific issue. This is now a political issue, because this has been so shamelessly politicised by people in power within the medical community. Sage obviously enjoyed its power trip that it got when it was, newspapers were leading on the advice that the Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies was giving to the government every day for a period of months during lockdowns. We were all hanging on their every word to see what the scientists were going to say about whether we were allowed to go outside or not this week. But we've got to learn to live with COVID, and we've got to learn to go back to normal. As you were saying in your introduction, the UK Health Security Agency is Public Health England, with a new name written on the front in crayon. And let's not forget what Public Health England used to do. Our memories are not that short on issues like obesity, where they would tell us that we need sugar taxes because we're too stupid to resist buying a chocolate bar. This is exactly the same nanny state mentality, that they think we need to be told to have these jabs in our arms every 5 minutes. And of course, I think you'll agree with me on this, Kevin, that we live in a free society. If people want to have a vaccine every 5 minutes or every time someone coughs near them, then great, good for them. But first of all, I don't want to pay for it. And secondly, we do not need people in power like Jenny Harris stoking fear in this way and telling us that we're going to need to rely on vaccines forever all the time, otherwise we're all going to die from COVID, because it just is not borne out in reality.
Yes, the Prime Minister announced that all restrictions were lifted more than a month ago now, and this was part of the programme to get this country used to living with COVID. But Jenny Harris said in this Accounts Committee meeting, Britain is still in a period of uncertainty. and she's talking about, you know, the next, that there is uncertainty about the next variant and where we're heading with all this. I mean, the thing is, we need to stop all this talk, don't we? I mean, we don't talk about being in periods of uncertainty because lots of people are getting colds or lots of people are getting the flu. It's this kind of ridiculous kind of bubonic plague attitude that is reserved exclusively for COVID, which is now not a particularly lethal condition.
COVID has completely warped our sense of normality. We live with all kinds of risks every day of our lives, and that's never been a problem before because that's the nature of living your life. But with COVID, everybody forgot how to think normally, and we started exceeding all this power to the scientific and the medical communities who are naturally risk averse and who ideally would like us to live in a sort of sterilized cube where we never have any interaction with anyone, and we have perspex separating us from the outside world. It's just a power trip. If people are relying on vaccines every 6 months, then that means you can have the constant looming threat of vaccine passports. You can threaten to take away people's liberties at any moment you want to. So there's a clear political motive. If you're someone who enjoys having political power over people's lives, enjoys being able to wield that whenever you like, it's just not something that we need. It's not something we've needed for a long time. This is not what learning to live with COVID looks like. This is not what going back to normal life looks like. And we need to learn to stop giving in to the whims of people at the top of the medical community in this way, because otherwise they are just going to continue to exercise more and more power over our lives in all sorts of different ways, and they'll become too powerful for us to be able to stop them.
In December, number 10 Downing Street, the Prime Minister, the government bought 114 million new Pfizer and Moderna doses of the COVID vaccine. Do you think there's a suspicion that they really just want to use them?
Quite possibly. I mean, if we've got all those vaccine doses, I can think of a much better use for them, and that is donating them to governments of third world countries in Africa and in Asia who are struggling to get vaccines to people who want them, rather than loading up people in this country with 5 or 6 or 7 doses when that's really not going to have any effect, it doesn't seem, on the level of protection they get. Let's give it to people who can actually use it. And of course, ideally, we did not need the government to be purchasing hundreds of millions of doses of vaccines. I'm very worried about the cost of this. Jenny Harries also mentioned in her speech that there will be some free testing would be continued, along with these free vaccines every 6 months. The tax burden is already the highest it's been for many, many decades. We've got, of course, a cost of living crisis. We've got inflation. I would not be surprised if continuing COVID measures such as free vaccine and free testing is used a year or two down the line to justify yet another tax rise or yet another increase in national insurance contributions, which is just going to make us poorer, just going to make our lives more difficult and without any benefit, because we don't need this extra protection from a little bit of sniffles.
The government spent a lot of money at the height of the lockdowns advertising to terrify us. You know, do what you're told, put your mask on, stay indoors, otherwise you'll be like this guy here with a ventilator on, lying in hospital with his eyes staring at you. They spent a lot of money scaring the hell out of the population. About time they spent a similar amount of money reacclimatising the population to normality, bringing them back to normality, bringing them back to a position where they can actually learn to live with COVID, because we're not there at the moment, are we?
We're not. It's no wonder we have a mental health epidemic when we have a political class that seems to be so addicted to stoking fear in this way. You know, we talk a lot about how the political class is quite incompetent and they tend to be bumbling and they tend to stoke bureaucracy and not really know what they're doing. But what COVID brought to our attention is just how dark they can be as well, just how awful and just making people scared for their lives. We had government-sponsored adverts of people literally being told, you're going to kill your grandmother if you don't follow our advice, if you don't do what we tell you to do. It's like the nanny state gone to a whole other level with a whole other dimension of horrors on top of it, because it's not just that we're telling you what to do, we're telling you what to do under pain of death. I don't see how it could get much worse than this for people like you and I who are opposed to the growth of the nanny state.
Yes, that's what we're talking about here. the nanny state got hold of the COVID crisis and went into overdrive, and somehow or other we've got to get out of it. As I say, it would be a good idea, wouldn't it, Jason, for the government to spend some money on advertising, recalibrating the mindset of the British population about COVID. It isn't really the horror condition that everyone should be terrified of anymore, is it?
Well, ideally, I'd quite like them to give that money back to us in the form of some kind of tax cut that is badly needed, yes. But if they must spend it, then, let's have a bit of positivity, let's have a bit of happiness, which is well-deserved because we've gone through 2 years of misery, and which we are now at the safest point we've ever been with COVID. By far, it's just a bit of sniffles, and clearly there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of unwarranted fear out there about COVID. So if the government could do its bit to make that go away, then that would be very welcome.
Jason, excellent to talk to you as always. Thank you so much. That was Jason Reed, political commentator and a UK lead at the Young Voices organisation. When we come back...